This wasn't the program we planned for today, but sometimes life gets in the way of the plans we make. And that's what happened in our family over the past month. You see, my mom, who I've known for a very long time, changed addresses. She went from her home in Burlington to heaven, the home she's been longing to go to for quite some time, but God wasn't quite ready for her to go yet. But now He decided it was time. The last few weeks before God called her home to heaven were hard on her. She was in the hospital, and then she came back home to the nursing home she lived in. But things just weren't the same. My mom, if you knew her, knew that she loved people and she loved to talk. She was a very social person. As a matter of fact, I told several people she was a social butterfly. And this last month, before her address change, she had difficulty communicating and telling those that she loved them. But you know, it was hard for us as her family to watch her, because we knew that it hurt her when she couldn't talk to us, when she couldn't respond to the things we were saying. And one thing that made us very happy was knowing that when her time on earth came to an end, she would be going to heaven. She'd be going to heaven where my dad was, and her mom and her dad and her brother and sisters and lots of other family and friends who had gone to heaven before her. And because of that, and because we knew how difficult life was for her in this past year and a half, really, we knew that she was much better off. Even though, yes, we will miss her, we were sad to see her go, but we were glad that she's in heaven now with Jesus and my dad. And I know she's happy to be there as well. One of the things that was really difficult through this season, because of the COVID pandemic that we're living through, her funeral wasn't quite what she planned. She had planned her funeral over 5 years ago when her best friend passed away. She decided she wanted to make sure her plans were in place. And so that's what she had done. But sadly, the plans she had made were not what happened. You see, COVID restrictions made it a little difficult for us to have the visitation and the funeral and the gathering after the funeral that she would have loved for us to be able to have, so that we could have shared stories about her and had lots of people share their stories of our mom, which we know there were lots. We've received cards and flowers, and so have other members of my family. But the funeral itself was really, really different. I actually wrote about it, and I'd like to read that to you today. Now, she was buried on November 18th, 2021, and it was a very beautiful ceremony, but it was very different. It was very small. Only our family were there, and when I say only our family, it was only our Canadian family, because I actually come from a fairly large family. Large in the fact that my mom was one of 5 siblings. But in our family, it was just my brother and I. And so everybody else doesn't live in Canada. They live in Wales and England and some in the US. But there are so many of them, but none of them were able to be there for this special occasion. So it seemed very, very odd. And of course, friends weren't able to come, and Mom had a lot of those. And we've even heard of, on Facebook, people have been telling us how much our mom meant to them. And Pastor Sal, the pastor who did the funeral, has been getting emails from people saying how much she meant to them, how important she was, how she was the first person to welcome them to church, how she was interested in their lives, and every week when she would see them, she would ask them how things were going. But for us, on the day of the funeral, it wasn't quite what Mom had planned, and it was really different than we would have envisioned it being at another time. So I wrote this little blog about a COVID funeral. On November 18th, we buried my mother. She was Mom to me, Ma'am to my brother, Gran to her grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and many others. Lots of people called my mother Gran. Auntie or Aunt Milvy to my many cousins, and Milvy to her friends. COVID never took her from us, so even though this is called a COVID funeral, it wasn't because COVID was what took her from us. It was just that her time after 94 and a half years, well-lived years, I must say. But COVID sure messed up the plans she had made for her public transition from this life into the next. Instead of the traditional send-off with visitation the day before and the day of the funeral, when many friends would come to share in our and their grief, we met together as a family to see her one last time, laying at peace. There were 14 of us. There would have been more, but it was difficult for our oldest daughter and her family to come down. So they were with us on FaceTime. And another couple was with us because we needed another pallbearer, and he was the 6th pallbearer. Even the pallbearers changed because just that's the way things were. It was the first time we had all been together since COVID hit. We had planned a family get-together, but then COVID hit and all the shutdowns, and we were never able to get together. COVID exploded and the world shut down. The room around us as we stood there and sat around, the room looked bare and large. Instead of the normal myriad of floral displays scattered around the room, there was just the family casket spray, the flowers from the granddaughters, a few pictures, and some cards. And as our family had one last hour of visitation, we gazed at our now silent Mom, Gran, friend. Maybe that was why, to me, it didn't seem like her. She was missing the sparkle, her cheeky smile, and for those who knew her, you know she was rarely silent. And Joel even talked to our grandsons about this. It was just her shell that was there. What made her Mom, what made her Gran and great-gran, that part of her was gone. That part of her was with Jesus now. So all we were looking at was her shell. Then there was time for just one more glance, and it was time to close the coffin and leave for her final resting place. We slowly followed the procession up the road to the cemetery where we would have a family graveside service, and to say goodbye and we love you one last time. There at the graveside we stood. It was a little bit chilly, but it wasn't raining and the sun was shining, which was kind of nice. In many ways, it seemed surreal. Mom, who was loved by so many, had only 17 of us. 23 if you include the 6 who are with us on FaceTime, even though they wish they could have been there in person. But such was the reality of a COVID funeral. Pastor Sal spoke of Mom and how she was loved by so many. He spoke of her love for those around her and her family. And we all knew that if not for COVID, this send-off would have been so different. We are planning on having a celebration of life in the new year, when her friends can come and officially say goodbye. And our family, including our daughter in the north, will all be there. We will remember her life, the joy and support she was to many, and rejoice that now she is healthy and whole. In 1965, we came to Canada as a family of 4. Now we are left as a family of 20. Mom and Dad are gone, but they left behind a legacy. Their legacy is found in my brother and I, her 4 granddaughters, and her 8 great-grandchildren. They taught us to love each other, and more importantly, to love God. And that is a legacy worth continuing. Mom, we love you, and we will see you again.